All right. We're almost finished with our discussion of offline contracting. There's just one more topic I want to cover, and that's the role of norms in ensuring free and informed consent. So we're going to shift a bit from a doctrinal legal perspective to a more sociological one. And the reason for doing this is that, at least as I think, you can't really understand consumer contracting unless you understand the role that norms play in it, and in particular, the role of norms in ensuring free and informed consent. And a good number of the commentators have overlooked this, and the courts are sometimes more friendly to norms than the commentators, and sometimes not. But with that, let's take a look briefly at the role of norms in online contracting and offline contracting. Sorry, we'll look at them later in online contracting. The comparison is one reason for doing this video now. But we're going to look at the role of norms in offer and acceptance and see how they solve some of the puzzles we've had about offer and acceptance. So let's start with a sample norm. To illustrate the idea, we need an example. And we'll just use one example, both to keep things brief and because it'll serve our purposes. That's all we really need to illustrate the idea. So we'll take what you can call the fitness norm, right? The norm is that sellers sell only goods fit for the purpose for which such a good is ordinarily used. So for example, selling a hairdryer that burns your hair would be selling something that's not fit for the purpose for which it's ordinarily used. Selling a hammer that breaks when you try to drive a nail with it, another example. You can think of a lot of examples. And interestingly, this norm actually has a very long history. We see it in more modern history with the rise of market economies in England. You see the rise of this norm. It becomes the custom and practice in the marketplace, a norm, right, to offer products that sellers only sell, products fit for the purpose for which they're ordinarily used. But if you go back into ancient Roman law, ancient Roman law notices the same custom and practice, the same norm. And eventually in the common law, this norm gets recognized and given legal force as the warranty of merchantability, right? Warranty, just another name for promise, right? So the courts recognize it as the promise, the warranty of merchantability, i.e. that goods will be fit for the purpose for which they're ordinarily used. That's how the courts define merchantability. And the British courts that do this explicitly note that, look, in the marketplace, the norm already exists. We're just recognizing and giving legal force to something that's already a practice in the marketplace. So that's our norm. The fitness norm is just the only one we'll take. And what we want to do is show how the norm creates free and informed consent. So it's not reading the document, it's not reading the piece of paper in the box, it's not, as we get to later online, reading the agreement behind the hyperlink that makes your consent informed. It's norms, right? At least as long as norms exist. And our first step in doing this is to explain the notion of a norm we need, the concept of a norm we need, because we'll use a special kind of norm known as a coordination norm. And one of the interesting things about this norm is that we're all already familiar with it. You're familiar with it from elevator use, at least before the pandemic. Since we're holding this course in the middle of a pandemic, elevator use has changed, right? Think of before the pandemic, you're getting into an elevator, there's some other people in there. Where do you stand? Right? Well, you see down at the bottom here, this is the three-person distribution. Let's make it a little easier to see. If these two people are already in the elevator, where do you stand? Well, everybody knows where they stand. You stand here. Right? That's you. You stand a little bit behind the two people and between them. That is, if you're not looking at your cell phone. Another, if you interesting, at least interesting to me, given my research on norms, cell phones, smartphones are making this norm, disintegrating this norm, because people walk in the elevator with their smartphone and they're not paying attention to where they stand. But let's put that aside. We're going to put aside the pandemic. We're going to put aside smartphones, and we will just worry about where people stand in elevators before all that. So there's the 3-person distribution, and we all know what happens if this person gets out, right? If this person gets out, where does the person in the back go? Where does this person go? That person goes over there. That's what happens. And I've discussed this a lot, indeed, around the world. This is an international norm. Everybody recognizes that this is what happens. And so what's going on? Well, there's a norm, right? The norm is to face forward, right? You look at the door, and to keep yourself as far away as you can from the person closest to you. Maximize the distance from your nearest neighbor, right? Get as far away as you can from the person closest to you. And if you think about it, there you want to maintain some peripheral eye contact. But if we were getting very precise about the norm, we'd want to mention that. But our idea is just a norm. What we want to notice is there's a norm where people coordinate their actions. And that's the kind of norm that we'll look at to explain how people coordinate their actions in market transactions, in marketplaces. So that's the idea of a coordination norm. The other classic example is driving on the right-hand side of the road. Same deal. Everybody coordinates their actions to drive on the same side of the road. And in the United States and most European countries, that's the right-hand side, right? In England, Australia, Britain, Australia, it's the left-hand side. So left or right, the coordination is everybody to drive on the same side of the road. Elevator, though, is another nice example, and a nice example because until somebody points it out, you've never thought about it, but you knew, right? You knew the norm. And if you like a definition of a coordination norm, there it is. It's a behavioral regularity in a group. But it exists because everybody has a shared goal they want to realize, right? Everybody shares a goal. Elevators share the goal of using the elevator, getting people in the elevator, but trying to minimize the sense of overcrowding. Drivers share the goal of driving on the same side for safety reasons. So they share the goal. Elevator users realize their goal by maximizing their distance from the person closest to them, and drivers share their goal by driving on the same side as look, if everybody's driving on the right, I drive on the right. If I think for some reason everybody's suddenly going to drive on the left, I drive on the left. I drive on the same side as everybody else. Everybody believes that, and so everybody adheres to the regularity. This is from We'll Need Later, right? So that's what we have. And the fitness norm is a coordination norm. It's like it. Right? Sellers and buyers share a goal. They both want the purchase of fit goods, right? And they achieve that goal by buyers trusting sellers to offer only fit goods. See, so you go in, you don't do much investigation when you buy a hairdryer, hammer, microwave, or whatever. You don't do basically no investigation to determine if it's going to work as it's supposed to. You just assume that, right? So you buyers and sellers have the goal of offering fit goods. Sellers have it because if they don't offer goods fit for the purpose for which they're ordinarily used, they'll lose money. The word will get around in the marketplace and people won't buy from them. So they have the goal, buyers have the goal, and we do it, the means we do it by just trusting the seller to offer those goods. So that makes it easy for us. We can just walk in and buy it without worrying about it. Does it really work the way it's supposed to? And the seller can offer it without having to address countless questions about, does this work the way it ought to? just like the elevator. So that's the idea. Very quick exposition. I say quick because my co-author and I are just completing a 300 and some page book on this topic in the case of privacy. So, well, I have about 90,000 words to say in this, but this is the core of the idea. So what we want to notice is, do we get informed consent this way? Yes, right? Take the fitness. With regard to fitness, we got one norm, so we're going to only look at whether consent is informed with regard to fitness. Do you know the product is fit? How do you know that? Well, so your consent is informed in that regard if you know the product is fit for the purpose for which it's ordinarily used. And you do know that as long as you know the business follows the norm. And as we just said, the business will follow the norm because they lose money if they do not. And of course, there will be exceptions where businesses try to get away with something and do for some time. But as a general rule, businesses follow the norm and consumers know that. So that's why we don't investigate. Does it work the way it's supposed to? What about free consent? So norm ensures informed consent. Let me go back to that for a minute, because the point here is that this is how it happens, right? We don't have to read, as we said before, we don't have to read the piece of paper. We don't have to read the thing behind the hyperlink, which is good because we don't read, because we don't need to. We know what we need to know from the underlying norms, not from the piece of paper in the box or later on the agreement behind the hyperlink. That's written by lawyers. It's written by people like us for businesses to protect them and to control their legal liability and to protect them in the possible if there is possible litigation in the future. So it's a legal document written by a lawyer that serves the client's purposes for possible legal action and for business planning. It's actually not meant for consumers to read. As we said, both the Uniform Commercial Code and the Restatement of Contracts, in fact, note. So, but then we had the puzzle. This is the puzzle we ended on last time. Well, how in the world are we informed, right? And my answer is through coordination norms. So that's it. But yeah, freedom can seem to be a problem. Consent's not supposed to be just informed, but it's supposed to be free. But how? No, you said, well, but how is consent free, right? You just said, we walk in, we trust the buyer, we buy the product without investigation. And if you think about it, you have little choice but to do that in any modern marketplace. We lack the time and expertise to investigate these products, and the buyers would be mostly unwilling to cooperate, I should think. So what choice do we have but to trust that the product is fit for the purpose for which it's ordinarily used and just go along with the norm? Yeah, the norms inform us, but don't they do that by taking away our freedom and leaving us very little choice but to conform to the norm? It looks like that, but the answer is that a constrained choice can still be a free choice. That as long as we see that, we'll see that, yeah, having to conform to the norm can actually, paradoxically, maximize my freedom. The example I usually use for this is the vacation in the Cayman Islands. Cayman Islands are a popular vacation spot, at least in the US. And they're also very expensive to go to. They're islands, right? And they cater to the tourist trade. So food and hotels are expensive. But suppose your dream has been to vacation in the Cayman Islands, but you just can't afford it. But then you see this all-included package, right? Airfare, hotel, food, all included, and you can afford it. So you sign up for the all-included package. You go to the Cayman Islands. When you sit down to eat the food that's all included, you have little choice but to eat the food. You could starve, you could not eat and go without food, but you can't afford to buy enough food for the whole trip unless you eat the all-included food. So what choice do you have? Isn't your choice constrained? Yes, that choice is constrained, but the key thing is that it's part of a broader plan, right, that you freely chose. What you did was constrain your choice to eat the food so you could freely realize the broader plan. And aren't we the same with respect to our product purchases? If I want to buy a hairdryer, microwave, toaster, whatever, I've got a lot to do. I don't want to spend any time investigating whether it's fit for the purpose for which it's ordinarily used. I got better things to do with my time. And so it's great that it's great that I can walk in, conform to the norm, trust the buyer, and walk away with the product, sure that it's fit for the purpose for which it's ordinarily used, and not have to worry, right? So it's just like the Cayman Islands. I got plans that I freely pursue, and the constraint of the norm helps me pursue those plans because it relieves me of something else I would otherwise have to do, investigate the product. In the Cayman Islands example, the other thing I'd have to do is pay for food that I can't afford. Right? So it works. I think freedom, it also promotes freedom when you look at it in the right way. So do we get what we want out of an explanation of free and informed consent? What we said we wanted out of an account of offer and acceptance is, well, does it give us free consent, informed consent, and free consent? And our answers are yes, yes, for norms. Okay, that's in very brief the idea. Just so I won't ask about this on the exam, but I ask about working with legal doctrines, but without this picture of how norms give us free and informed consent, I think consumer offline contracting and online contracting just remains one big puzzle. And one of the things that we might want you, if you come to the US, to Chicago, Kent, one of the things I do in some of my courses is explore this some more to give a fuller picture of consumer contracting. But for this course, this is enough. And like I say, if you're worried, gee, this is too subjective and too far out of the line with legal doctrine that I'm used to working with, so I'm worried about the exam, don't worry. It doesn't go in the exam, but it helps our general understanding of what is going on. So with that, let us end this video, and we will press on to the